What if the secret to mastering your mind wasn't invented by modern psychology, but was instead buried in the wisdom of ancient cultures that thrived thousands of years ago? Think about it. Long before smartphones, social media, and the endless distractions of modern life, people faced hardships we can barely imagine: wars, plagues, famines, and yet they cultivated mental discipline so profound it still echoes through time. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, once wrote that the key to strength wasn't in controlling the world around him, but in mastering his own thoughts. And he wasn't alone. Across deserts, mountains, and forgotten cities, civilizations we rarely study today developed astonishing techniques for resilience, focus, and emotional control, methods so powerful they allowed them to endure when others crumbled. This isn't just history, it's a blueprint, because while our challenges today might look different, the human mind hasn't changed. We still wrestle with stress, distraction, and the weight of our emotions. But what if the answers we're searching for have been waiting in the shadows of time? In this video, we're uncovering the mental discipline secrets of cultures that outlasted empires, societies that turned adversity into advantage, chaos into clarity. You'll meet the Nabateans, who carved an entire civilization into cliffs and thrived in one of the harshest deserts on Earth. You'll discover how the Minoans of Crete maintained unshakable calm in the face of natural disasters that would paralyze us today. And you'll learn how the Indus Valley civilization, one of the most advanced of its time, prioritized emotional balance in ways modern science is only now beginning to understand. These weren't just survival tactics, they were philosophies, ways of thinking that transformed ordinary people into pillars of resilience. And the best part: these lessons aren't locked in the past, they're tools waiting for you to pick them up, because whether you're facing a personal crisis, struggling with focus, or just tired of feeling at the mercy of your emotions, these ancient strategies offer something rare: proof that human beings are capable of far more than we often believe. So let's step into their world, uncover their wisdom, and bring it back to ours. By the end of this journey, you won't just understand Stoic principles like emotional mastery and unbreakable focus. You'll see how they've been tested, refined, and proven not in theory, but in the crucible of time itself. Ready? Let's begin. Picture a 10-year-old boy standing barefoot in the freezing mud of the Eurotas River, his tattered cloak offering no protection against the winter wind. Around him, older boys shout taunts, while instructors watch with cold indifference. This was the Spartan Agoge, the brutal training system that forged some of history's most disciplined minds. But here's what most people miss: it wasn't just about physical endurance. The Spartans understood something profound about the human psyche, that true strength isn't born from comfort, but from confronting discomfort head-on. They didn't just tolerate hardship, they weaponized it. Think about how this mirrors Stoic philosophy. Epictetus, born a slave, famously said, "Difficulties show what men are." For the Spartans, every cold night, every missed meal, every humiliating challenge was a deliberate test not of the body, but of the will. They weren't just raising soldiers, they were crafting minds that could face any storm without flinching. Seneca put it perfectly: fire tests gold, suffering tests brave men. And the Spartans took this literally. When a young recruit complained about the bitter cold, his instructor would simply say, "Then you'll learn to stop feeling it." Now contrast that with modern life. We avoid discomfort at all costs, thermostats set to perfection, endless entertainment at our fingertips, complaints when our coffee isn't hot enough. But here's the question: what happens when real adversity strikes? The Spartans knew that resilience isn't something you discover in the moment. It's something you build through daily practice. Their entire culture was a Stoic exercise in voluntary hardship, sleeping on reeds instead of beds, eating coarse black broth, enduring public whippings without crying out. These weren't punishments. They were rehearsals for life's inevitable battles. So let's bring this home. When you hit the snooze button instead of facing the day, or scroll mindlessly to avoid a difficult task, you're not just making a small choice, you're weakening your ability to handle bigger challenges. The Spartan lesson: start small, take cold showers, skip the extra snack, walk instead of drive, train your mind to embrace discomfort before it's forced upon you. Because as the Stoics taught, the obstacle isn't the problem, it's the path. And the Spartans, for all their extremes, proved that the mind trained in hardship becomes unshakable. At dawn, a lone samurai kneels in perfect stillness, his sword laid before him like a mirror reflecting not just his face, but his character. This was the ritual of Caesar, a moment of ruthless self-examination where warriors of feudal Japan confronted their flaws with unflinching honesty. The Bushido Code demanded more than battlefield skill. It required a mastery of the self so complete that emotions bowed to reason, just as the Stoics preached. Victory is reserved for those willing to pay the price of self-denial, wrote Yamamoto Tsunetomo, echoing Seneca's assertion that no man is free who is not master of himself. The samurai's daily life was a living Stoic exercise. Where Marcus Aurelius penned private meditations in his journal, warriors kept death poems, short verses composed as if each day were their last. Both practices forced confrontation with mortality, stripping away trivial concerns. Imagine waking with the question, if today were my final sunrise, how would I act? That razor's edge awareness sharpened judgment, turning ordinary choices into tests of integrity. The samurai called this memento mori, by another name ikigo iki, meaning one life, one encounter. Every interaction became sacred because it could never be repeated. Modern life craves such clarity. We drown in endless notifications, half-hearted commitments, and the myth of multitasking. But what if you borrowed the samurai's morning ritual, not with a sword but with a notebook? Before reaching for your phone, ask, what virtue will guide me today? The Stoics called this proactive intent, setting your moral compass before the storms of the day hit. The samurai version, gi, or righteous action, doing what's right before considering what's easy. Here's where Bushido and Stoicism merge into practical wisdom. Both recognize that discipline isn't about punishment, it's liberation. When a samurai polished his sword daily, he wasn't just maintaining a weapon, he was reinforcing the habit of excellence. Similarly, your morning routine, whether it's 5 minutes of journaling, a walk without headphones, or simply making your bed with precision, isn't about the act itself. It's a rehearsal for the moments that matter. The samurai knew small disciplines compound into unshakable character. So tonight, as you turn out the light, ask yourself the question samurai whispered before sleep: did I live today with honor? Not perfection, but intention, because like the Stoics, they understood that mastery isn't a destination. It's the 1,000 small battles you fight against distraction, cowardice, and complacency. And those battles, they're won the moment you choose to kneel, metaphorically or otherwise, and confront the reflection of who you're becoming. A lone Viking stands at the prow of his longship as waves crash against the hull, salt spray stinging his face. Behind him, men mutter about turning back. This storm could swallow them whole. But he grips the ship's dragonhead and laughs into the wind. This scene from the saga of Grettir the Strong isn't just bravado. It reveals the Norse secret to mental mastery, Hugr. More than mere courage, Hugr was the Vikings' belief that the mind's battles determined fate long before swords clashed. They knew what Epictetus would later teach Rome. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Consider the Viking who prepared for battle by rehearsing defeat. In their sagas, warriors would visualize their own deaths not with fear, but with cold precision. They called this fate weaving, a practice eerily similar to the Stoic premeditatio malorum. Both traditions understood, when you've stared down the worst-case scenario in your mind, real-world challenges lose their fangs. The Havamal, a Viking wisdom text, puts it bluntly. The coward believes he'll live forever if he avoids battle, but old age leaves no refuge for those without courage. Now contrast this with modern mental habits. We distract ourselves from discomfort, medicate away anxiety, and hope challenges vanish if ignored. But the Vikings and Stoics agreed, true strength comes from leaning into mental resistance. When a Norse warrior felt fear before battle, he didn't deny it, he transformed it into fury they called berserkergang. Epictetus offered a calmer version. First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Both philosophies recognized that emotion isn't the enemy, unchecked reaction is. Here's where Hugr becomes practical. The Vikings divided the mind into 4 parts: thought, memory, will, and that indefinable spark Hugr, that bound them together. Their daily lives were exercises in mental discipline. Rowing for hours in freezing seas wasn't just physical training, it was willpower cultivation. Feasting before battle wasn't gluttony, it was a ritual to sharpen focus through controlled excess. Even their insults were psychological warfare, designed to provoke enemies into emotional mistakes while they remained ice-calm. So try this Viking-Stoic hybrid exercise tonight. Light a candle, the modern equivalent of their torchlight, and write down one mental battle you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a difficult conversation, a creative project gathering dust, or a habit you know needs breaking. Then ask the Hugr question, what would the version of me who's already conquered this do next? Not with arrogance, but with the quiet certainty of a navigator reading the stars. Because whether you're steering a longship through gales or navigating office politics, the principle remains. Storms test the ship, but Hugr determines the course. The 10th Legion crouched behind their shields as flaming arrows rained down on the fortress of Masada. Around them, the desert wind howled like the screams of their enemies, but not a single soldier broke formation. This wasn't just Roman discipline, it was Stoicism in action. These men had been trained to see chaos not as a threat, but as raw material for mastery. Their secret, a simple mantra drilled into them from recruitment. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. Marcus Aurelius would later pen those words in his meditations, but they were already etched into the bones of every legionary. What made Rome's military machine unstoppable wasn't just superior tactics or weaponry, it was their psychological framework. Before battle, centurions would lead their troops in a ritual called contemplatio mortis, where soldiers visualized not just victory, but the humiliation of defeat, the agony of wounds, even their own deaths. Far from demoralizing them, this practice straight from Stoic philosophy turned fear into fuel. Just as Epictetus taught his students to differentiate between what's within their control and what isn't, Roman soldiers learned to focus solely on their duty, leaving outcomes to the gods. Marcus Aurelius embodied this as both emperor and general. During the Marcomannic Wars, he commanded armies while writing his meditations by torchlight. One passage captures the Stoic soldier's mindset perfectly. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When barbarian tribes breached the Danube frontier, he didn't rage against the injustice. He methodically fortified the borders, treating each crisis as training for his character. His troops saw their leader weathering storms without flinching. and it made them unbreakable. This emotional control had a tactical purpose. Roman formations relied on absolute synchronization. A single soldier panicking could collapse an entire battle line. The Stoic solution: daily mental drills alongside physical training. Recruits practiced standing motionless for hours under blistering sun, holding formations while comrades shouted insults, even eating meals in perfect silence. These weren't just tests of endurance, they were masterclasses in separating emotion from action. Seneca described the ideal soldier as a mind wrapped in armor, and Rome's legions proved it worked. So how does this apply to your battles today? When stress hits at work or in relationships, do you react or respond? The Stoic legionary's method offers a blueprint. Pause, assess what's truly within your control, then act with precision. Next time pressure mounts, borrow their testudo mindset, not the famous tortoise formation, but the mental shield. Ask, what would the version of me who's already triumphed do next? Because whether you're facing a hostile crowd, a looming deadline, or personal turmoil, the same principle holds. Composure isn't the absence of chaos, it's mastery amid the storm. In the pre-dawn darkness of an ancient Indian monastery, a shaven-headed monk sits cross-legged on a stone floor, his breath moving like a slow river. Around him, the world stirs, birds call, leaves rustle, distant villagers begin their day, but his attention never wavers. This is Vipassana, the Buddhist art of seeing reality as it truly is, stripped of judgment or craving. 2,000 miles west, Seneca penned nearly identical advice to his friend Lucilius. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, saying to yourself the while, is this the condition that I feared? Though separated by continents, these two traditions arrived at the same profound truth. Freedom comes not from controlling external circumstances, but from mastering our relationship to them. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from attachment to possessions, relationships, even our own thoughts. The Stoics called this same insight the dichotomy of control. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he might as well have been summarizing the Four Noble Truths. Both philosophies recognized that most human misery stems from resisting what is, rather than skillfully working with reality as it unfolds. A Buddhist monk watching his cravings arise and pass without acting on them was practicing the same mental discipline as Epictetus, refusing to be disturbed by insults. If someone speaks badly of you, that's their problem. Your only concern is whether you deserve it. Here's where these ancient systems converge into practical wisdom. Buddhist mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath while observing thoughts without engagement, mirrors the Stoic practice of prosauch, or attention. Both train the mind to become an impartial witness rather than a reactive participant. Try this hybrid exercise today. Set a timer for 5 minutes. As you breathe, imagine your thoughts as leaves floating down a stream. When you notice yourself clinging to a particular thought, worry, planning, nostalgia, gently return to the breath. This isn't about emptying the mind, it's about recognizing that you are not your thoughts, just as the Stoics taught we are not our circumstances. Modern neuroscience confirms what these traditions knew intuitively. MRI scans of meditating monks show decreased activity in the default mode network, the brain's self-centered chatter. Similarly, studies on Stoic practitioners reveal improved emotional regulation during stress tests. The practical takeaway: detachment isn't apathy, it's the space between stimulus and response where freedom resides. Next time you feel overwhelmed, borrow the monk's perspective. Pause, label the emotion, "This is anger," or "This is anxiety." Then ask the Stoic question: what part of this situation can I actually influence? The Buddha's most radical teaching was that enlightenment could happen in an instant if one fully accepted the present moment. The Stoics mirrored this with their concept of amor fati, loving one's fate. Neither promised a life without pain, but both offered something better, the ability to meet pain without being shattered by it. So tonight, as you lie in bed, practice the monk's final mindfulness exercise. Scan your body from toes to crown, releasing tension without judgment. Then, like Seneca reviewing his day, ask, where did I resist reality today? Where did I cling when I should have let go? The answers might surprise you and transform you. An ancient Egyptian proverb carved into temple walls whispers, the scales of Maat measure not gold, but the weight of one's heart. This wasn't just poetry, it was the foundation of a civilization that thrived for 3,000 years by mastering balance. Maat, the goddess of truth and order, represented more than divine justice. She embodied a radical philosophy of self-regulation that would make any Stoic nod in recognition. Imagine a society where judges wore her feather as a reminder that every verdict must align with cosmic harmony, where pharaohs weren't considered rulers but custodians of equilibrium. This was a culture that understood what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "Nothing is so conducive to greatness of mind as the ability to examine systematically and honestly everything that meets us in life." The Egyptians saw imbalance as the root of all suffering. Too much wealth without wisdom led to ruin. Too much ambition without restraint invited chaos. Their 42 declarations of innocence recited before the gods included vows like "I have not caused hunger" and "I have not stolen milk from children," but also psychological insights. "I have not multiplied words beyond necessity," a direct echo of Stoic warnings against gossip and complaint. Both traditions recognized that external order flows from internal discipline. When an Egyptian scribe dipped his pen to write, the heated man carves his own tombstone. He might as well have been channeling Epictetus, teaching that anger is a form of self-slavery. Modern life drowns in extremes: workaholism masked as ambition, burnout worn like a badge of honor. But the Maat philosophy offers a corrective. Their negative confessions weren't about guilt, they were a daily audit of equilibrium. Picture a vizier leaving his office at the pyramid site at dusk, refusing to review one more scroll because the reed needs time to bend back. Compare this to Seneca's advice to Lucilius, "Rest before you're tired." Both grasped that true productivity isn't measured in hours, but in sustained harmony between effort and renewal. Here's where Maat becomes startlingly relevant. The Egyptians divided the day into 3 equal parts: labor, leisure, and rest, a rhythm modern science confirms optimizes cognitive performance. They built houses of life near temples where scribes studied astronomy, medicine, and ethics, recognizing that specialized knowledge without wisdom creates imbalance. Marcus Aurelius would have approved, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" So tonight, try this hybrid ritual from the Nile and the Stoa. Place 2 objects on your desk, perhaps a stone for stability and a feather for lightness. As you review your day, ask, where did I tip the scales? Did I work with obsession or presence? Speak with honesty or excess, not to judge but to recalibrate. Because as the Egyptians knew and the Stoics affirmed, a life of greatness isn't about standing tall, it's about standing centered. The great Aztec god Tezcatlipoca strides across the night sky, his obsidian mirror revealing not reflections but possibilities. In one myth, he shatters the world to rebuild it anew, forcing humanity to dwell in Nepantla, the sacred space between destruction and creation. This wasn't just storytelling, it was a masterclass in mental resilience. The Aztecs didn't just endure uncertainty, they revered it as the furnace where character is forged. Their concept of Nepantla, meaning the space in the middle, mirrors Stoicism's core tenet. Life's richest growth happens not in stability, but in the turbulent in-between. Epictetus, the enslaved philosopher who turned adversity into wisdom, would have recognized Nepantla instantly. His teaching, "First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do," captures the Aztec practice of ritualizing discomfort. Before battle, Aztec warriors would fast in freezing mountain passes, not to weaken themselves, but to become intimate with uncertainty. They called this face-to-face time with the unknown, a deliberate confrontation with chaos that stripped away illusion. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. Exposure to controlled stress like cold therapy or challenging puzzles literally rewires neural pathways for resilience. Consider how this applies to modern life. When your career path suddenly crumbles or a relationship fractures, the instinct is to rush toward resolution, any resolution. But Nepantla teaches us to pause in the discomfort. The Aztec midwife's proverb says it best: "A child born too quickly dies of thin blood. Growth needs gestation." This aligns perfectly with Marcus Aurelius' meditation on patience. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Here's where Nepantla becomes actionable. The Aztecs ritualized transition periods, solstices, eclipses, even the space between waking and sleeping, as holy ground for self-examination. Try their twilight practice for 7 minutes at dawn or dusk. Sit where light and darkness blend. Journal 2 questions: what is ending within me? And what wants to emerge, not to force answers, but to cultivate comfort with not knowing. The Stoics called this the art of acquiescence, recognizing that between stimulus and response lies our greatest power. Tezcatlipoca's mirror still holds up to us today. When life fractures your plans, do you see only broken pieces or the reflections of who you might become? Nepantla and Stoicism agree, uncertainty isn't your enemy. It's the sacred workshop where your unshakable self is being crafted, one unpredictable moment at a time. A Persian king sits alone in his marble chamber at midnight, weighing a decision that could double his empire's gold or destroy its soul. Outside, merchants whisper of bribes paid to rival lords, but his hand hesitates above the wax seal. This moment, immortalized in the Shahnameh, reveals the heart of Far, the ancient Persian belief that true power flows not from crowns or conquests, but from an unshakable inner nobility. Like the Stoic concept of arit, Far wasn't inherited. It was earned through daily acts of integrity. The poet Ferdowsi wrote that kings who kept Far walked with the radiance of 10,000 suns, while those who lost it ruled over ashes. Seneca's letters to Lucilius echo this same truth, when he warned that a throne doesn't make a king, but a king makes the throne. He might as well have been translating Persian wisdom. Both traditions recognize that external authority means nothing without the discipline to wield it justly. Consider Cyrus the Great, who conquered Babylon not with brutality, but by honoring its temples and freeing enslaved people's acts that secured his Far so powerfully that even his enemies swore allegiance. Centuries later, Marcus Aurelius would demonstrate the same principle, pardoning rebels who plotted against him because the best revenge is to be unlike your enemy. Modern leadership often misses this lesson. We celebrate charisma over character, results over righteousness, but Far's legacy lives in those who choose principle when it's costly. Picture a CEO rejecting a lucrative deal because the supplier uses child labor, or a whistleblower exposing corruption knowing it might end their career. These aren't just ethical stands, they're acts of self-creation, forging what the Persians called the divine spark within. Here's where Far becomes personal. The Persians believed every person, not just kings, could cultivate this radiance through small, relentless choices. Their Book of Counsel for Kings advised daily self-examination. Did my words align with my heart today? Did my comforts weaken my resolve? Try this tonight. Light a candle symbolizing Far's light and review one decision where convenience clashed with conscience. Not to judge, but to ask, what would the version of me who never compromises integrity do next? Because Far's deepest secret wasn't about impressing gods or subjects. It was about facing your own reflection at dawn. As the Stoics taught and the Persians proved, when you polish your character with every choice, the world can't help but see the shine. A lone Aboriginal elder sits cross-legged in the red dust of the Australian outback, his hands tracing ancient symbols in the earth as children gather close. In the dream time, he begins, every rock, every bird, every breath exists in two worlds, the eternal and the now. This isn't mythology, it's a masterclass in presence. The Aboriginal concept of dream time collapses past, present, and future into a single moment of awareness, what Stoics like Marcus Aurelius called the only time that's truly ours. When the emperor wrote, "Concentrate every minute on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness," he might as well have been channeling 40,000 years of indigenous wisdom. Consider the story of the rainbow serpent, a dreamtime narrative about creation. Unlike Western myths that unfold linearly, this serpent doesn't just shape the world long ago. It continues shaping it through every rainfall, every sunrise, every act of human attention. The lesson: creation isn't a one-time event, it's happening now through you. This mirrors the Stoic exercise of mental division, where you pause to ask, what part of this moment is my doing? The Aboriginal hunter tracking kangaroo footprints in the sand isn't just surviving, he's participating in the ongoing dream time by fully inhabiting his senses. Modern life fractures this unity. We scroll through meals, half listen to loved ones, and treat the present as a waiting room for some imagined future. But the dreamtime practice of dadiri, a deep, contemplative listening, offers an antidote. It's not passive, it's active receptivity, like Seneca's advice to linger among a limited number of master thinkers. Next time you're in conversation, try this hybrid technique. Soften your gaze slightly, feel the weight of your body, and listen not just to words, but to the spaces between them. The Stoics called this prosoch, the art of sustained attention. Ground yourself in the physical world like the Aboriginal gatherers who could read the land's subtle signs. Place your bare feet on grass or floorboards and notice textures. Hold a stone until it warms to your touch, a practice both indigenous cultures and Stoics used to anchor wandering minds. Marcus Aurelius kept a plain ivory sphere on his desk for this very purpose, writing, "The sphere of the mind should be like this, smooth, unbroken, wholly present." So tonight, as stars emerge, ask yourself the dreamtime question. Where did my spirit walk today? Not in guilt, but in curiosity. Did it dwell in regrets of yesterday, anxieties of tomorrow, or did it touch, even briefly, the eternal now? Because whether you frame it through Stoic philosophy or 40 millennia of indigenous wisdom, the truth remains. Life isn't lived in years or days, but in the sum of fully inhabited moments. And those moments, they're dreaming you into existence right now. A philosopher lounges naked in a barrel under the Athenian sun, casually sipping water from his hands as Alexander the Great looms over him. "Ask any favor you wish," declares the most powerful man on earth. Without looking up, Diogenes replies, "Stand aside, you're blocking my sunlight." This was cynicism in action, not just a philosophy, but a living rebellion against every unnecessary attachment that weighs the mind down. When Alexander reportedly said, If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes. He recognized what modern psychology now confirms. The fewer dependencies we have, the freer our minds become. The Cynics took Stoic indifference to its logical extreme. Where Epictetus taught that external things should be used indifferently, Diogenes demonstrated it by owning nothing but a wooden bowl, until he saw a child drinking from cupped hands and threw even that away. His barrel wasn't poverty, it was liberation. By systematically stripping away comfort, sleeping on hard ground, wearing rags, eating simple food, he proved what Seneca later articulated: he who needs riches least enjoys riches most. The Cynics weren't rejecting material goods out of austerity, but because they discovered a profound psychological truth. Every possession we cling to becomes a hook that can pull us off center. Modern minimalism echoes this ancient insight. When Marie Kondo asks, "Does this spark joy?" she's channeling the Cynic's razor. Does this serve my freedom? But here's where most people miss the point. It's not about counting your belongings or moving into a tiny house, it's about auditing your mental dependencies. That notification addiction, the need for constant validation, the closet full of clothes you never wear but keep just in case, these are today's barrels, containers for fear disguised as utility. Try this Cynic-Stoic hybrid exercise today. Carry a small notebook for 24 hours. Each time you reach for your phone, buy something non-essential, or complain about discomfort, mark the page. Then ask Diogenes' favorite question: is this necessary? Not to judge yourself, but to map the invisible fences around your mind. Because as the Cynics proved and the Stoics refined, real wealth isn't measured in what you own, but in how little you require to be at peace. The deeper lesson lies in what happened after Alexander walked away from that barrel. Diogenes didn't celebrate his victory over the conqueror. He simply went back to basking in the sun. That's the ultimate freedom, when external events, whether flattery or famine, can't disrupt your inner equilibrium. So tonight, before you sleep, practice the Cynic's bedtime ritual. Place one hand on your chest and ask, what did I truly need today? The answer might surprise you and set you free. The longship groans as wave after wave crashes over the bow, the storm screaming like the Valkyries themselves. A Viking grips the mast, his face streaked with salt and spray, yet his eyes burn with something beyond defiance, a deep, unsettling calm. This is weird in action, the Norse concept that fate isn't just inevitable, but a thread already woven into the great tapestry of existence. Unlike passive resignation, Weird demanded something far more powerful, meeting the unchangeable with unbroken will. Marcus Aurelius would have recognized this instantly when he wrote, "The obstacle becomes the way." Both traditions understood true courage isn't denying reality, but staring into its teeth and saying, "Then let's begin." Consider the Viking ritual of laying down the oar. When an old warrior felt death approaching, he'd set his weapon on his lap and compose a poem welcoming the end, not with despair, but with the clarity of someone who'd long since made peace with Weird's designs. Compare this to Epictetus teaching his students to make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Both philosophies strip away the illusion of control while amplifying personal agency, not over events, but over our stance toward them. Modern life recoils from this wisdom. We rage against cancelled flights, obsess over 5-year plans, and medicate the discomfort of uncertainty. But the Norse had a practice called fella I acute skugga, to fold into the shadow. When storms made sailing impossible, they didn't waste energy cursing the wind. They repaired nets, told sagas, and waited, not passively, but with readiness to act when Weird permitted. This mirrors Seneca's advice. Times of rest are not idleness, but preparation. Here's where Weird becomes practical. The Vikings divided fate into three strands: what's already happened Orlurg, what's unfolding now Verdandi, and what might yet be Skuld. Their daily lives balanced fierce action with profound acceptance, rowing hard while knowing the current decides the rest. Try this hybrid exercise when facing an unavoidable challenge, a layoff, an illness, a betrayal. Ask first, which strand is this? Is it Orlurg, unchangeable past, then grieve but don't drown in it? Skuld, uncertain future, prepare but don't obsess. Verdandi, present moment. This is where your power lives, so next time life storms hit, channel that Viking at the mast, not by pretending you wanted the tempest, but by recognizing the waves were always coming. Your choice isn't whether they arrive, but whether you'll let them break you or teach you to sail. A single crack runs through the clay tea bowl, its jagged line filled with gold, not to disguise the flaw, but to celebrate it. This is Wabi Sabi, the Japanese art of finding beauty in imperfection, serenity in transience. As the tea master pours steaming matcha into this broken vessel, there's no apology for its asymmetry, only reverence for its history. 2,000 years earlier in Rome, Seneca wrote to his grieving friend Lucilius, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." At first glance, these philosophies seem opposites, one embracing flaws, the other resigned to sorrow. But dig deeper, and you'll find the same radical truth. Peace comes not from perfecting life, but from accepting its inherent fractures. Consider the tea ceremony's deliberate imperfections, the irregular handmade cup, the slightly bitter matcha, the silence that sometimes lingers too long. Each flaw is a doorway to presence. The Stoics practiced this same principle through premeditatio malorum, visualizing worst-case scenarios not to despair, but to strip away the illusion of control. When Marcus Aurelius meditated on his own mortality each dawn, he wasn't practicing pessimism, he was filling his cracks with gold. Both traditions recognized we suffer most when we demand that life conform to our fantasies of how it should be, rather than embracing what is. Modern culture screams the opposite. Airbrushed selfies, highlight reels, the relentless pursuit of optimization. We've turned life into a checklist of unattainable ideals. But Wabi Sabi whispers, that chip in your favorite mug, it's proof you've lived. That project that didn't go as planned, it's compost for growth. Seneca put it bluntly, you're afraid of dying. Tell me, is the life you lead really so perfect? This isn't about settling, it's about shifting focus from what's missing to what's already whole. Try this hybrid ritual tonight. Take a blank page and divide it into 3 columns. In the first, write one self-criticism that haunts you, maybe, I'm disorganized or I procrastinate. In the second, reframe it as Wabi Sabi. My clutter shows a life richly lived, or my pauses allow ideas to ripen. Then, in the Stoic column, ask, does this flaw actually prevent me from living virtuously? Often, you'll find the answer is no. That crack in your confidence, it lets the light in. That stumble in your past, it taught your feet the ground. Because here's the secret both traditions understood. Perfection isn't just impossible, it's sterile. A flawless vase holds no stories. An unweathered face reveals no wisdom. Next time you catch yourself criticizing some flaw, remember the tea master's bowl, not despite its golden seam, but because of it. After all, as the Japanese poet Issa wrote moments after his daughter's death, this dewdrop world is a dewdrop world, and yet the Stoics would have nodded, so should we. A Druid stands knee-deep in the icy waters of a sacred spring, his breath rising in white plumes as dawn breaks over the mist-covered oak grove. For 3 days and nights he has fasted, chanted, and waited not for a sign from the gods, but for something far more powerful. Imbaz, the sudden flash of insight the Celts called fire in the head. This wasn't mystical divination. It was the disciplined cultivation of mental clarity, a practice that would have made Epictetus nod in approval when he wrote, "First learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak." The Celts revered Imbaz not as supernatural inspiration, but as the fruit of rigorous mental preparation. Before major decisions, whether moving cattle to summer pastures or negotiating tribal alliances, Druids would enter these ritual states to strip away distraction and access what modern psychology calls System 2 thinking, slow, deliberate cognition. Their vision quests mirrored the Stoic practice of mental reservation, where one withholds judgment until all facts are clear. A Celtic chieftain facing battle wouldn't rush to arms at the first insult. He'd consult the Druid who'd immersed in him, Baz, seeking not prophecy but perspective. Epictetus framed this same idea in practical terms. Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Say to it, "Hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent." The Celts took this further by creating physical rituals to slow the mind. Chewing raw salmon flesh, a sacred Imbaz ritual, or standing in freezing streams forced the body into discomfort so the mind could rise above reactive thinking. Modern neuroscience confirms their intuition. Mild stressors like cold exposure temporarily dampen the amygdala, quieting emotional noise so the prefrontal cortex can operate with crystalline clarity. Here's where Imbaz becomes actionable today. The next time you face a high-stakes decision, whether signing a contract or mending a relationship, try this hybrid ritual. First, create your own threshold of hesitation. Take 10 deliberate breaths while visualizing your options as physical objects. The Celts would imagine stones in a river, some moss slick and unstable, others solid beneath the current. Then ask Epictetus' question, what evidence supports this choice, not to eliminate emotion, but to ensure it doesn't drown reason? The brilliance of Imbaz lies in its recognition that clarity isn't the absence of complexity, but the ability to navigate it without being overwhelmed. Like a Stoic stepping back to view events from the view from above, the Druid emerging from his vigil saw patterns invisible in daily hustle. So tonight, before sleep, light a candle, the modern equivalent of their sacred fires, and ask yourself, where did I react today when I should have responded? Where did noise drown out my inner knowing? The answers might not come immediately, but as the Celts knew and the Stoics affirmed, true wisdom often arrives when we stop chasing it. A Mayan elder kneels by the fire, tracing a circle in the dirt with one finger. Around him, children lean in as he whispers the phrase that has echoed through generations. In Lakech Alakayin, I am another yourself. This wasn't just poetic greeting. It was a radical philosophy of interconnectedness that would make Marcus Aurelius sit straighter in his throne. The Mayans understood what Stoic cosmopolitanism later articulated, that every action sends ripples through the human web, and true wisdom lies in recognizing yourself in strangers. When the emperor wrote, "What's bad for the hive is bad for the bee," he was distilling the same truth carved into Mayan temple walls centuries earlier. We thrive only when we see others not as separate, but as reflections of our own humanity. Consider the Mayan ball game Pak Atok, where players used hips to keep a heavy rubber ball aloft. More than sport, it was a living metaphor for in Lakech, the ball representing the sun's journey, every player's move affecting the whole. Miss a pass and the entire team bore the consequence. This mirrors Seneca's letters on civic duty. No one can live happily who has regard to himself alone. Both cultures recognize that individual discipline means little if not directed toward collective good. The Mayan calendar keeper tracking Venus cycles wasn't just studying stars. He was maintaining cosmic harmony so farmers could plant and children could eat. Modern life has fractured this wisdom. We curate social media bubbles, outsource community to algorithms, and measure success in personal metrics, but in Lak'ech whispers a corrective. The Mayans built cities where every house faced communal plazas, where water management required neighborhood cooperation, physical manifestations of their belief that isolation is an illusion. Epictetus would have approved, "You are a citizen of the world and a part of it, not some subordinate appendage." Here's where ancient wisdom becomes street-level practical. Try the Mayan Stoic mirror exercise today. When someone irritates you, a slow cashier, a loud neighbor, pause and silently repeat, in Lak'ech, then ask Marcus Aurelius' question, "If this person's struggles were mine, what grace would I hope for?" Not to excuse harm, but to short-circuit dehumanization, because as both traditions prove, the line between us and them is drawn in sand, washed clean by the next tide. The Mayans measured time in vast cycles, not days or years, but backtons spanning centuries. Yet their greatest insight was timeless. Your existence is never solitary. Every withheld kindness, every careless word, every moment of presence or absence alters the tapestry. So tonight, light a candle and place two mirrors facing each other. Watch how one flame becomes infinite. That's in Lak'ech in action. That's Stoic duty made visible. And that's the secret both cultures guarded. When you finally see yourself in all things, responsibility ceases to be a burden, it becomes your bones. The eternal flame flickers in the darkened temple, its light casting shadows that dance like truths half glimpsed. A Zoroastrian priest tends this sacred fire not as worship, but as a mirror. For the ancients of Persia, fire represented a Shah, the cosmic principle of truth, order, and alignment between thought, word, and deed. To stand before these flames was to undergo the most terrifying examination, not of the gods, but of one's own integrity. Seneca would have recognized this ritual instantly when he warned Lucilius that no one is more enslaved than the liar. He was distilling a Shah into Stoic terms. Both traditions understood mental discipline begins where self-deception ends. Consider the Zoroastrian confession ritual where devotees would recite, "I turn away from all falsehood. I align my steps with the path of a Shah." This wasn't about moral perfection, but radical honesty, the willingness to name one's shortcomings without flinching. Modern psychology calls this cognitive dissonance reduction. The Persians called it walking straight. A merchant who cheated customers but donated to temples wasn't praised for generosity. He was challenged to see the contradiction. Like Epictetus demanding his students, first say what you would be, then act accordingly. A Shah demanded coherence between inner truth and outer action. Today's world runs on convenient fictions, the polished LinkedIn profile hiding imposter syndrome, the "fine" we reflexively utter when we're crumbling inside. But a Shah whispers, every unspoken truth is a knot in the soul. The Persian poet Rumi, inheritor of this tradition, put it bluntly, "Be crumbled, so wildflowers will grow where you are." Not healed, not perfected, but honest. Seneca's letters return to this theme like a hammer on anvil. We are often more frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than reality. What are we avoiding by our lies, if not the temporary discomfort of facing what's already true? Here's where a Shah becomes practical. The Zoroastrians divided truth into three strands: thoughts manashni, words gavashni, and deeds kanashni. Try their nightly audit, light a candle, your modern temple fire, and ask, where did these three diverge today? Did I complain about a friend's absence while secretly enjoying the peace? Did I take credit for work that wasn't wholly mine, not to self-flagellate but to realign, like a navigator correcting course by the stars? Because a Shah's deepest lesson isn't about morality, it's about freedom. The Persian mystics taught that lies don't anger the divine, they entangle the liar in invisible chains. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is change, life is opinion," he was offering the same key. Our suffering lies not in circumstances, but in the stories we cling to. So next time you feel resentment brewing or anxiety spiraling, pause and ask the Asha question. What raw truth am I dressing in these garments of drama? The answer might burn, but like that sacred flame, it also purifies. The canoe slices through waves taller than palm trees, its sails straining against the gale. At the helm, the navigator squints through salt-crusted lashes, no compass, no stars visible, just the feel of currents humming through the steering paddle. For 30 days and nights, he's guided his crew across the trackless Pacific by something the Polynesians called mana. Not luck or magic, but an inner compass forged through discipline. This was the ultimate Stoic test, Epictetus' assertion that circumstances don't make the man, they reveal him, brought to life in shark-filled waters. Mana wasn't bestowed by gods, it was earned through relentless practice. Young navigators memorized wave patterns until they could read the ocean like a scroll. They fasted to sharpen their senses, endured sleepless nights to hone their focus, not unlike Seneca's students who trained in poverty to master desire. The difference: Polynesians didn't just tolerate hardship, they revered it as the whetstone that sharpened mana. When storms hit, they didn't pray for calm, they chanted, "Paddle with your arms, steer with your bones," believing their ancestors' discipline flowed through their very marrow. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. Studies on elite athletes show that those who view stress as performance-enhancing outperform those who merely endure it. The Polynesians knew this instinctively. Their legendary navigator Hatu Matua didn't become a living legend by avoiding storms. He sailed into them, trusting that each wave mastered increased his mana. Epictetus would have recognized the strategy. Difficulty shows what men are. Therefore, when a difficulty befalls you, remember that God, like a trainer of wrestlers, has matched you with a rough young man. Here's where mana becomes actionable today. The next time you face a challenge, a grueling project, a fitness goal, even a difficult conversation, reframe it as a mana-building exercise. Ask, what skill is this struggle developing? The Polynesians measured mana not by titles or possessions, but by the depth of your wake, the lasting impact of your actions. Start small. Wake before sunrise to write 3 sentences of clarity. Learn one new, not literal or metaphorical, each week. Like the navigators who could sense distant islands by the swell beneath their feet, you'll begin detecting your own growing resilience in subtle ways: a steadier breath during conflict, a quieter mind amid chaos. Tonight, try the Polynesian ritual of Iminao, the search for wisdom. Sit cross-legged on the floor, no chairs. Place your hands palm up on your knees, and for 7 minutes, mentally retrace your day's challenges like a navigator reviewing his course. Where did you flex discipline? Where did you default to autopilot? The Stoics called this the view from above. The Polynesians called it following your wake home. Both lead to the same truth. Power isn't found in calm waters, it's forged in the storm, stroke by deliberate stroke. High on a Himalayan ridge, a monk sits motionless as the pre-dawn wind bites through his robes. His lips move silently, repeating the same phrase again and again. Not a prayer for protection or wealth, but a radical mind-altering tool. Regard all dharmas as dreams. This is Lojong in action, Tibet's 1,000-year-old system for rewiring thought patterns through 59 razor-sharp slogans. At first glance, they seem cryptic, even contradictory, until you realize they share the same goal as Marcus Aurelius' private journaling: to dissolve the illusions that distort reality. When the Stoic emperor wrote, "The universe is change, life is opinion," he was articulating what Tibetan masters expressed as all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. Both traditions recognize that suffering stems not from events themselves, but from our rigid interpretations of them. Take Lojong's most jarring slogan, "When the world is filled with evil, transform mishaps into the path of enlightenment." At face value, it sounds like passive acceptance until you apply it the way Stoics used premeditatio malorum. Imagine losing your job. The untrained mind spirals into panic, crafting narratives of failure. The Lojong practitioner immediately recites, "This is the perfect opportunity to practice non-attachment." The Stoic responds with Epictetus' question, "What's within my control here?" Both approaches share a revolutionary premise. Adversity isn't an interruption of your path, it's the raw material for forging wisdom. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. Studies on cognitive reappraisal show that reframing challenges as opportunities literally rewires neural pathways. The Tibetans systematized this through mental flashcard drills, carrying pebbles in their left pocket to count each time they caught themselves in negative thought patterns, shifting them with Lojong slogans. You can try a modern version right now. When stuck in traffic, instead of simmering with frustration, whisper, "This traffic is my teacher," not to suppress annoyance, but to uncover the patience beneath it. Marcus Aurelius used a similar technique, writing, "The impediment to action advances action." Here's where Lojong gets startlingly practical. One of its core exercises, Tonglen, or giving and taking, mirrors the Stoic practice of sympatheia. Breathe in the world's pain, a colleague's stress, a stranger's loneliness, then exhale relief. This isn't martyrdom, it's emotional alchemy. The Tibetans understood what Seneca meant when he wrote, "No one can live happily who has regard to himself alone." By willingly touching discomfort instead of fleeing it, we expand our capacity to hold life's complexities without breaking. Tonight, try this hybrid ritual. Light a candle and place two objects before you: a small stone representing obstacles, a feather symbolizing lightness. For 3 minutes, hold the stone while mentally listing current struggles. Then pick up the feather and apply one Lojong slogan to each. If I can't fix this, can I use it to grow? Or, what if this is exactly what I need right now? The goal isn't to solve problems, but to shift your relationship to them, just as Marcus Aurelius did when he reframed his political enemies as training partners for patience. Because here's the secret both traditions grasped. The mind isn't a static entity, it's a malleable instrument. Every thought we reinforce is a groove worn deeper. Every mental pivot carves a new pathway. Whether through Tibetan pebbles or Stoic journaling, the effect is the same, a mind no longer at the mercy of circumstance, but sculpted through daily, deliberate practice. And that's the ultimate liberation. A young Lakota warrior wraps himself in a buffalo robe as the first snowflakes of winter begin to fall. For 4 days and nights, he'll sit alone on this windswept butte, no food, no weapons, only a sacred pipe and the piercing clarity of isolation. This is the Hanbal Chayapi, the vision quest, a ritual not of deprivation but of revelation. As Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius from his own self-imposed retreat, "Nothing is more fitting for the soul than solitude. In it, the mind stops borrowing its thoughts from others." Across continents and centuries, these two traditions recognized the same truth. Wisdom grows not in the clamor of the crowd, but in the fertile silence between our thoughts. The vision quest wasn't about escaping reality. It was about confronting it stripped bare. Warriors would enter this solitude not knowing if they'd receive a guiding vision or simply the cold realization of their own limitations. Like Marcus Aurelius journaling at the front lines of battle, they sought not answers but honesty. A Cheyenne elder once described it as letting the wind scour your soul until only the unshakable remains. Compare this to Seneca's practice of daily self-examination. When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and measure my words and deeds. Both rituals shared a radical purpose: to dissolve the illusions we construct in company and meet ourselves without disguise. Modern life has all but erased such spaces. Our pockets buzz with notifications, our homes blare with background noise, and even our walks are soundtracked by podcasts. But the vision quest's lesson persists. Without intervals of stillness, we risk becoming strangers to ourselves. Digital detoxes, those trendy retreats where executives surrender their devices, are pale imitations of the Hanbal Chayapi. Where native seekers faced existential winds, modern participants often struggle to sit through a silent meal. Yet the impulse remains valid. Epictetus observed, "If you seek truth, you will find comfort in the end. If you seek comfort, you will find neither truth nor comfort." Here's where ancient practice meets present urgency. The Lakota didn't wait for crisis to quest, they scheduled solitude as regularly as harvests. Try this adapted ritual. One evening each moon cycle, power down your devices at sunset. Not to meditate or journal, though you may, but simply to notice what arises when the digital chatter fades. Like the warrior listening for animal signs in the dark, pay attention to which thoughts emerge when you're not drowning them out. Seneca's letters hint at this when he describes nights where the soul speaks clearly to itself. Tonight before sleep, ask the vision quest's central question: when was the last time I heard my own voice without interruption? Not the voice shaped by social media or workplace expectations, but the one that knows what you'd whisper if no one were judging. Because whether on a snow-dusted butte or in a city apartment with the Wi-Fi off, the principle holds: clarity isn't given, it's uncovered, layer by patient layer, in the spaces we dare to leave empty. An old Taoist master sits by a river, watching his young student struggle to lift water with cupped hands. The harder the student tries, the more liquid slips through his fingers. Without a word, the master fills a clay jug and sets it adrift, letting the current carry it effortlessly to shore. This is Wu Wei in action, not laziness or passivity, but the art of aligning action with the natural order. The Stoics would have recognized this instantly when Epictetus taught, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do." He was describing the same principle by another name: harmony with the Tao, the fundamental rhythm of existence. Wu Wei translates roughly as non-doing, but that's a dangerous oversimplification. Picture a master calligrapher whose brushstrokes flow without hesitation, not because he hasn't practiced, but because 10,000 hours of discipline have dissolved into instinct. This is disciplined effortlessness, where preparation meets opportunity so completely that action feels inevitable. The Stoic concept of amor fati, loving one's fate, mirrors this perfectly. Both philosophies reject struggle against reality in favor of skillful cooperation with it. A sailor doesn't rage against the wind, she adjusts her sails. A Taoist farmer doesn't yank seedlings upward, he provides water and watches them grow. Modern psychology calls this state flow. That magical zone where challenge and skill balance perfectly, time distorts, and self-consciousness falls away. But the ancient Chinese systematized its cultivation through practices like Tai Chi, slow, deliberate movements designed to train the body and mind in yielding without surrendering. Watch a Tai Chi master push hands with an opponent. They don't meet force with force, but redirect energy like a river around stones. Marcus Aurelius would have appreciated the metaphor when he wrote, "The obstacle becomes the way." Here's where Wu Wei becomes practical today. Think back to moments when you've experienced effortless focus, maybe playing an instrument, coding, or even washing dishes when your hands seem to move without thought. That's Wu Wei peeking through. The Taoists developed breathwork exercises to recreate this state intentionally. Try this hybrid technique now. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8. Not to control your breath, but to follow its natural tide until your mind settles into the rhythm. The Stoics used a similar anchor with their morning intentions, setting the day's course like a leaf placed gently on a stream, trusting the current to carry it. The brilliance of Wu Wei lies in its paradox. By releasing the death grip of over-effort, we often achieve more. A musician who stops obsessing over missed notes and instead merges with the melody plays flawlessly. A public speaker who ceases to perform and simply speaks from conviction moves audiences. The Taoist sage Zhuangzi told of a butcher whose blade never dulled because he carved along the natural seams of the meat, a perfect metaphor for working with, not against, the grain of reality. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, recall one challenge that's been resisting your efforts. Ask the Wu Wei question. Where have I been pushing when I should have been flowing? Then borrow the Stoics' evening review, not to judge your day's struggles, but to notice where you might have mistaken force for effectiveness. Because here's the secret both traditions understood: the universe has currents. Learn to sense them, and you'll move through life not with exhaustion, but with the quiet power of a leaf carried downstream in perfect alignment with the river's wisdom. The whirling dervish spins, his white robes flaring like the petals of a lotus unfurling in slow motion. To the untrained eye, it's a mesmerizing dance, but for the Sufi mystic, each rotation is an act of annihilation. This is fana, the dissolution of the ego, the melting away of the self into the infinite. With every turn, the dervish surrenders a little more, not to oblivion, but to a vastness that makes personal worries seem like dust motes in sunlight. 2,000 miles west in Rome, Marcus Aurelius penned a startlingly similar thought. You are a little soul carrying around a corpse. Both traditions, though worlds apart, arrived at the same piercing truth. Peace begins where self-importance ends. Fana isn't passive resignation, it's active surrender. Imagine holding a fistful of sand at the ocean's edge. The tighter you clutch, the more grains slip through. But relax your grip, and suddenly your hand becomes part of the tide itself. That's the essence of fana. The Sufi poet Rumi described it as the drop disappearing into the ocean, only to discover it was the ocean all along. Compare this to Epictetus' teaching that happiness begins where selfish desire ends. Both philosophies recognize that our greatest suffering stems not from external events, but from the stories our egos spin about them. The "I deserve better" or "this shouldn't be happening" that amplify every sting. The Sufis developed razor-sharp techniques for ego dissolution. One master would carry 2 stones, one labeled, "I am nothing," the other, "I am everything." Each morning, he'd hold both, remembering his insignificance in the cosmos, yet his connection to all things. Stoics practiced a parallel exercise, visualizing their funeral to confront mortality's humbling truth. Marcus Aurelius meditated daily on the vastness of time and space, shrinking his problems to their true proportion. "Think of the whole of existence," he wrote, "and how small your share." Modern life feeds the ego's hunger relentlessly. Social media applause, titles on business cards, the ceaseless comparison game. But fana offers an antidote. Next time pride flares or resistance tightens your chest, try this hybrid ritual. Stand barefoot on grass or floor. As you breathe in, whisper, "This too is part of the whole." Exhale while mentally releasing one label you cling to: successful, wronged, special. The Sufis called this polishing the heart's mirror. The Stoics termed it returning to your rational nature. Both lead to the same liberation, the lightness that comes when you stop insisting life conform to your personal script. Tonight, light a single candle in a dark room. Watch how its flame doesn't compete with the darkness, it simply illuminates what's there. That's the Fana mindset, not self-erasure, but clarity unobscured by the smoke of ego. Ask yourself, where did I insist on being the sun today when I might have been content as a reflecting moon? The answer might just untie the knot in your chest. Because as both traditions prove, the tighter we clutch our idea of me, the more we miss the vast, quiet peace of being part of something infinitely larger. Under the sprawling branches of the baobab tree, an elder's voice rises above the crackling fire. A person is a person through other persons, he tells the children gathered at his feet. This is Ubuntu in its purest form, the African philosophy that binds individual growth to the collective, where self-discipline isn't a solitary pursuit but a sacred responsibility to the community. Centuries later in Rome, Seneca would write, "No one can live happily who has regard to himself alone," unknowingly echoing the elders' wisdom across continents and generations. Both traditions grasp the same profound truth. Your strength isn't measured by what you amass for yourself, but by what you contribute to the whole. The Ubuntu principle, "I am because we are," might sound poetic, but its practical implications are razor-sharp. In Zulu villages, disputes weren't settled by punishment alone, but by indaba, gatherings where every voice was heard until harmony was restored. The offender's rehabilitation wasn't just about personal atonement, it was about repairing the communal fabric. Compare this to Marcus Aurelius' meditation on interconnectedness. What brings you joy? Service. So long as you serve the common welfare, your cup will never run dry. Both systems recognize that true resilience flourishes in soil nourished by mutual care. Modern workplaces are catching up. Google's Project Aristotle revealed that psychological safety, the Ubuntu-like belief that teammates won't shame or reject you for speaking up, was the single greatest predictor of high-performing teams. Imagine a software engineer admitting a coding error without fear, knowing her colleagues will rally to fix it rather than blame her. That's Ubuntu in action. The Stoics called it sympatheia, the cosmic interdependence where every action ripples through the human web. When a leader creates space for vulnerability, they're not just managing, they're practicing an ancient discipline of collective strength. Yet here's where both philosophies challenge us. Ubuntu and Stoicism demand more than passive coexistence, they require active contribution. The Maasai warriors of Kenya don't ask, "How much do I own?" but "How many depend on me?" Their wealth is measured in lives uplifted. Seneca took this further in his letters, scolding Lucilius for hoarding knowledge. What's the point of wisdom if you don't pour it into others? So tonight, try this hybrid ritual. Light a candle and place 3 stones before you. The first represents your skills, the second your community's needs, the third the overlap between them. Ask, where have I been building walls when bridges were needed? Not with guilt, but with the clarity of the elder under the baobab tree. Because here's the secret both traditions guard. The most disciplined mind isn't the one that conquers alone. It's the one that lifts others as it rises. The yogi sits motionless on his tiger skin, legs locked in lotus position as the Himalayan sun beats down on his bare torso. His only movement, the slow rise and fall of his ribs, betrays the immense internal fire burning within. This is tapas in its purest form, the Hindu practice of disciplined austerity that transforms ordinary willpower into an unshakable force. The word itself means heat, not the scorching of punishment, but the purifying blaze that forges diamonds from coal. 2,000 years after these ascetics first demonstrated radical self-mastery, Epictetus would teach his students nearly identical principles. If you want to be strong, begin by giving up what weakens you. Both traditions recognized the same profound truth that freedom isn't found in indulgence, but in the disciplined restraint of our baser impulses. Consider the yogi's morning ritual. Before dawn, he plunges into glacial rivers not to punish his body, but to train his mind's dominion over comfort. He fasts not from hatred of food, but to sharpen appreciation for nourishment. Every act of self-denial becomes a conscious dialogue between impulse and will, what the Bhagavad Gita calls the stilling of the restless mind. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he was articulating what Hindu sages had practiced for millennia. That true control begins when we stop being slaves to our cravings. Modern science now confirms this ancient insight. Studies on willpower reveal it operates like a muscle strengthened through gradual challenge, exhausted by constant temptation. We live in the ultimate willpower gauntlet. Smartphones delivering dopamine hits every 3 minutes, supermarkets engineered to override self-control, careers that reward constant availability over disciplined focus. The average person checks their phone 261 times daily, not because they choose to, but because their topper's muscle has atrophied. Here's where this 5,000-year-old practice becomes startlingly relevant. The yogis systematized tapas through micro-challenges, holding a difficult pose one breath longer, meditating amid distractions, walking barefoot on rough terrain. These weren't masochistic exercises, they were cognitive training for life's inevitable storms. Epictetus mirrored this when he advised students to periodically wear coarse clothing or skip meals, not to suffer, but to remember comfort isn't entitlement. Tonight, try this hybrid ritual. Place 3 grains of rice on your tongue, the yogi's classic focus exercise. Resist chewing for 60 seconds while observing the saliva build, the jaw's instinct to move. Notice where your mind wanders. This isn't about the rice, it's about mapping your discipline gaps. As the grains soften, ask Epictetus' question: what am I allowing to control me that I could master with consistent practice? The answer might surprise you, whether it's that reflexive Instagram scroll or the inability to say no to trivial requests. Because here's Tapa's deepest lesson: austerity isn't deprivation, it's the gateway to profound abundance. The yogi who masters hunger tastes food more vividly. The executive who practices digital minimalism thinks with greater clarity. The Stoics knew it, the yogis proved it, and modern neuroscience confirms it. The less we're pulled by every whim, the more we access our highest capacities. So tomorrow morning, before reaching for your phone, stand barefoot on cold tile for 30 seconds. Let the discomfort remind you, every act of resistance isn't a denial of life, but an affirmation of your sovereignty over it. Before time had a name, before gods walked the heavens, there was only Tiamat, the primordial sea of chaos, her waters churning with infinite possibilities. This is how the Babylonian Enuma Elish begins, not with light or divine command, but with swirling, untamed potential. Yet from this chaos rises Marduk, the god who doesn't destroy the stormy waters, he divides them. With precise strikes, he carves the cosmos into orderly layers, sky above, earth below, the regulated flow of seasons and stars. The message is clear: creation isn't about eliminating chaos, but structuring it. Marcus Aurelius would have recognized this instantly when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Both traditions share the same radical premise. Tranquility isn't the absence of turbulence, but the skill to navigate it. The Babylonians didn't just tell this myth for entertainment. They encoded it in their legal systems, their ziggurats, even their astronomy charts. When a scribe carefully organized cuneiform tablets by category, or a priest tracked Venus cycles to predict harvests, they were enacting Marduk's ordering principle on earth. Compare this to Epictetus' discipline of ascent, that crucial pause between stimulus and response where we choose our mental architecture. The Enuma Elish whispers, your mind is that primordial ocean. Will you let it rage unchecked, or will you, like Marduk, become the architect of your inner cosmos? Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient intuition. Studies on cognitive scaffolding show that structured routines, whether morning rituals or to-do lists, literally rewire the brain to handle unpredictability. The Babylonians practiced this through Nambabai, anxiety-reducing rituals where they'd physically rearrange disordered spaces to restore mental clarity. A merchant troubled by nightmares might reorganize his shop's inventory, symbolically restoring cosmic order. Marcus Aurelius used a similar tactic, opening his journal each dawn with the same question: what is within my power to order today? Here's where myth meets modern practice. Try this hybrid technique tonight. When overwhelmed, visualize your thoughts as the chaotic waters of Tiamat. Then, like Marduk wielding his spear, divide them into 3 streams: concerns I can act on, concerns I must accept, and distractions masquerading as concerns. The Stoics called this the sorting dance. The Babylonians saw it as aligning with cosmic law. Either way, the effect is the same. What was once an undifferentiated storm becomes a map for action. So ask yourself, as the ancient scribes did, where have I been mistaking control over circumstances for mastery over my attention? That project deadline looming like a tempest, can it be segmented like Marduk's heavens? The argument replaying in your mind, might it be contained like the Babylonian Apsu, the ordered freshwater beneath the earth? Because the Enuma Elish's real magic isn't in its grand creation story. It's in the quiet revelation that every morning, when you choose focus over frenzy, you reenact the universe's first and most sacred act, bringing form to the formless. High in the Andes, an Inca farmer pauses mid-row, his weathered hands resting on the stone hoe. Around him, the community terraces cascade down the mountainside like stairways for giants, each level perfectly maintained not by one family, but by 20. This is Aini in motion, the sacred principle that every gift of labor, every shared resource, creates an invisible thread binding the community together. When a young couple builds their first home, neighbors arrive unasked with stones and alpaca wool. When elders can no longer work the fields, their meals appear as if by magic. But here's what outsiders often miss: Aini wasn't blind generosity. It was disciplined reciprocity, a stoic balance of giving and receiving that ensured no one's cup overflowed while another's ran dry. Seneca captured this exact principle in his letters. What's given becomes yours only when you pass it on. The Incas would have recognized the truth in those words. Their system wasn't charity, it was cosmic accounting. Help plant my field today, and I'll help roof your house tomorrow. Share your quinoa harvest when mine fails, and my pottery kiln keeps your family warm through winter. This mutual indebtedness wasn't burdensome. It wove a safety net so strong that Inca cities thrived without homelessness or starvation centuries before European welfare systems. Like Marcus Aurelius' concept of justice, what's bad for the hive is bad for the bee. Aini recognized that individual well-being depended on collective equilibrium. Modern life has fractured this wisdom. We swing between extremes: burnout from overgiving or isolation from underparticipating. The office worker who covers every holiday shift but never asks for help. The neighbor who accepts casseroles during illness but disappears when others need support. Aini offers a corrective: sustainable generosity requires boundaries as sturdy as Inca stonework. The Quechua elders had a saying, "A rope pulled too tight snaps, too loose fails to carry." They understood what modern psychology confirms, that resentment often stems not from giving, but from giving without reciprocity. Try this hybrid exercise tonight. Draw 2 columns on a page. In the first, list 3 instances where you've given time, energy, or resources this week. In the second, note 3 times you've allowed others to give to you. The gap between these columns reveals your inner imbalance. Like the Stoic practice of evening reflection, this isn't about guilt, it's about recalibration. The Inca farmers knew terraces erode if some stones bear all the weight, because here's Aine's deepest lesson: it takes equal discipline to receive as to give. When Seneca wrote, "He who cannot give cannot receive," he was describing the same sacred equilibrium. Next time someone offers help, resist the reflexive, "I'm fine." Instead, honor their capacity to contribute as you honor your own. That's the Andean secret hidden in plain sight. True community isn't built on heroic self-sufficiency, but on the courageous vulnerability of mutual need. And that's a harvest worth planting season after season. In the dim light of a 4th century Egyptian chapel, a seeker unrolls a fragile papyrus, its edges crumbling like dried leaves. The text whispers of Pistis Sophia, not just faith, but a profound trust in the inner voice that guides when all external lights fail. This Gnostic treasure didn't preach blind belief. It mapped a radical path to self-knowledge so precise that Epictetus himself would have recognized its Stoic heartbeat. First say to yourself what you would be, he taught, and then do what you have to do. Both traditions shared a startling conviction that wisdom isn't found in scrolls or sermons, but in the unlit corridors of your own examined mind. The Pistis Sophia's mystics practiced something they called the remembrance, a daily descent into the depths of consciousness to retrieve forgotten fragments of divine insight. Picture them sitting cross-legged on reed mats, breathing slowly as they interrogated each thought. Is this fear mine, or was it planted here? Does this desire align with my highest nature? Compare this to Marcus Aurelius' journaling ritual, where he dissected his own reactions like a surgeon with a scalpel. Why does this bother me? What weakness does it reveal? The methods differed, one mystical, one practical, but their aim was identical: to strip away the false selves we accumulate like layers of grime until only the unshakable core remains. Modern psychology calls this metacognition, the ability to observe your own thinking. The Gnostics systematized it through mirror-gazing meditations, where adepts would stare at their reflections until facial features blurred, leaving only the essence of awareness. Try this adapted version today. When overwhelmed, pause and mentally step back. Watch your thoughts like clouds passing, not to judge them, but to identify their shape and origin. As Epictetus urged, don't let the force of an impression knock you off your feet. Say to it, hold on, let me see who you are. Here's where ancient practice becomes urgent today. We live in an age of curated identities, Instagram personas, professional masks, the constant performance of happiness. But the Pistis Sophia asks, when was the last time you met your unmasked self? Not the version that laughs at office parties or performs for parents, but the one that whispers truths in midnight solitude. The Stoics had a tool for this, the view from above exercise, where you imagine observing your life from cosmic heights to spot patterns invisible at ground level. Tonight, light a candle and perform this hybrid ritual. First, the Gnostic question: what have I been afraid to admit to myself this week? Then the Stoic follow-up: if my closest friend acted this way, what counsel would I give? The gap between answers often reveals where we've outsourced our inner compass, because here's the secret both traditions guarded: self-knowledge isn't about discovering who you are. It's about remembering what you've always known but learned to ignore. And that's where true power begins. The reed stylus moves across the damp clay tablet with deliberate precision, each wedge-shaped mark etching not just words but truth into permanence. For the Sumerian scribe, this wasn't merely record-keeping. It was sacred participation in the me, the divine cosmic principles governing everything from justice to craftsmanship. Picture him pausing mid-sentence, feeling the weight of his responsibility. A single inaccurate measurement could disrupt temple offerings, misalign celestial calculations, unravel the delicate balance holding civilization together. This was discipline woven into the fabric of existence, not as rigid control, but as harmonious alignment with forces larger than oneself. Marcus Aurelius would have recognized this instantly when he wrote, "What's not good for the hive can't be good for the bee." Both traditions understood personal conduct wasn't about arbitrary rules, but resonance with fundamental laws as real as gravity. The me weren't commandments carved in stone. They were living currents, 56 divine decrees spanning truth, courage, even the art of song. When a Sumerian merchant weighed grain honestly despite the chance to cheat, he wasn't just being ethical. He was channeling the me of integrity, like a musician tuning to a perfect pitch. Compare this to Epictetus' distinction between what's up to us and what isn't. The merchant couldn't control drought or market prices, but his adherence to fair measure kept his soul in tune with cosmic order. Modern psychology confirms this ancient intuition. Studies show people who align actions with core values experience less stress, even when outcomes are unfavorable. The me offered Sumerians what Stoic virtue provided Romans, an unshakable compass when external rewards failed. Yet here's where these 4,000-year-old principles become shockingly relevant. Imagine a modern programmer deciding whether to ignore a glitch that benefits her company but harms users. The me of truth would whisper through millennia, "Is this code aligned with the cosmic principle of honesty?" Or consider a nurse falsifying charts to save time, not out of malice but exhaustion. The me of care wouldn't judge his fatigue but ask, "Does this act strengthen or fray the fabric of healing?" These aren't abstract moral dilemmas, they're daily battlegrounds where character is forged. The Sumerians believed neglecting the me didn't just damage society, it eroded the offender's very essence, like a lute falling out of tune with the symphony of creation. So let's bridge the ages with a practical exercise. Tonight, take a blank tablet or smartphone note and divide it into 3 columns. In the first, list one decision from your week that felt discordant, that white lie, rushed task, or ignored intuition. In the second, identify which me it might violate, not as guilt trip, but as diagnostic. Maybe that snapped remark to a colleague strayed from the me of diplomacy. That skipped workout, a disconnect from the me of physical mastery. Then, in the Stoic column, ask Marcus Aurelius' question, "If the divine part of me has been polluted, how can I purify it?" The answer isn't self-flagellation, but realignment, a deliberate act the next day to restore balance, like the scribe carefully correcting his tablet before the clay hardens. Because ultimately, the me and Stoicism converge on one liberating truth. Discipline isn't about punishment, it's about participation. When you choose patience in traffic, excellence in unnoticed work, or kindness when tired, you're not just being good. You're becoming a living conduit for principles that outlast empires, turning mundane moments into sacred acts. The scribe knew his words would outlive him by centuries. Your actions, they ripple farther than you'll ever see. The wind howls across the steppe like a living thing, ripping at the felt walls of the jur as the young herder tightens the ropes holding his home together. Outside, his prized horses huddle together, their manes whipping sideways as the storm descends without warning. To the untrained eye, this is disaster, but the old Mongolian grandmother sitting cross-legged by the hearth simply nods, murmuring Tengrian Medi under her breath. This phrase, meaning heaven's message, encapsulates a philosophy far deeper than mere resignation. It's the art of discerning between what must be endured and what can be shaped, between the unchangeable will of the eternal blue sky and the domain where human will still holds power. Tengri, the sky god of the Mongols, wasn't just a deity, he was the embodiment of a cosmic principle. Unlike gods who answered prayers with miracles, Tengri represented the immutable laws of existence. Storms would come, winters would starve the weak, and no amount of pleading could alter these truths. The Stoics would have recognized this instantly when Epictetus taught his students to divide all experiences into what's up to us and what isn't. He was articulating the same wisdom Genghis Khan's warriors lived by. Both traditions realized suffering begins when we exhaust ourselves raging against realities we cannot bend. Consider the Mongolian practice of wind horse meditation. Before battles, warriors would visualize their fears as dark clouds scattering before a galloping steed, not to banish the storm, but to remember their own mobility within it. Compare this to Marcus Aurelius' journal entry, "The obstacle becomes the way." The Mongol didn't deny the storm's fury, he tightened his grip on the reins. The Stoic didn't pretend adversity didn't exist, he asked, what action remains possible? Both cultivated a mindset that psychologist Viktor Frankl later termed the last of human freedoms, the ability to choose one's attitude in any circumstance. Modern life drowns us in illusions of control. Thermostats shield us from temperature, apps deliver groceries in minutes, and yet a single delayed flight can unravel our composure. The Tengri philosophy offers an antidote. Next time you're stuck in traffic, try the Mongolian herder's exercise, whisper Tengrian Medi, and mentally list 3 things about the situation you genuinely cannot change. The red light's timing, the cars ahead, the passage of time itself. Then, like Epictetus' disciple, identify one micro-action within your control, adjusting your posture, choosing an audiobook, practicing deep breathing. This isn't passive acceptance, it's strategic focus. The brilliance of Tengri worship lay in its dual awareness. Mongols revered the sky's vastness precisely because it dwarfed human concerns. Their shamans performed elaborate rituals not to manipulate the weather, but to align their spirits with its inevitability, much like Seneca's practice of premeditatio malorum, where he envisioned worst-case scenarios to drain them of their terror. When a herder lost half his flock to an early blizzard, he didn't curse the heavens, he adapted his winter strategy and celebrated the surviving animals' resilience. So tonight, light a candle, your modern campfire, and perform this hybrid ritual. Draw a circle on paper, dividing it like the Stoic dichotomy of control. In the outer ring, write 3 Tengri truths, unchangeable realities you've been resisting: aging, others' opinions, past mistakes. In the inner circle, note 3 wind horse action-specific responses still within your power: health habits, boundary setting, present moment focus. Watch how the exercise doesn't eliminate challenges, but clarifies where your energy belongs. Because here's the secret both traditions guard: serenity isn't the absence of storms, it's the ability to stand in the downpour without forgetting you're still the rider, not the rain. The next time life's gales threaten to uproot you, remember the nomad's wisdom. Some winds cannot be tamed, but every storm eventually gallops on. Your task: to outlast it with the same unshakable grace as the grasses of the steppe, bending, never breaking. A Jain monk sits beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient banyan tree, his hands resting gently on a child's shoulders as he recounts a parable older than the scriptures themselves. 6 blind men approached an elephant, he begins. One grasped the tail and declared it a rope, another touched the leg and swore it was a tree, the third pressed against the side and announced a wall. Each was certain and each was incomplete. This is Encantabhada in its purest form, the radical Jain principle that truth is multifaceted, and wisdom lies not in rigid certainty, but in the humility to hold multiple perspectives at once. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact," he was distilling this same ancient insight into Stoic terms, recognizing that the mind's greatest strength isn't in clinging to singular truths, but in navigating the spaces between them. The Jains didn't just preach this philosophy, they encoded it into their daily rituals. Before debating, scholars would recite a disclaimer acknowledging their limited viewpoint, a practice called syadvada, meaning perhaps. Imagine a courtroom where lawyers begin arguments by stating, "This is my current understanding, which may be partial." This wasn't weakness, it was intellectual rigor of the highest order. The Stoics mirrored this with their discipline of assent, that crucial pause before accepting impressions as absolute truth. Epictetus urged his students to interrogate every belief. Is this within my control? Is this judgment serving me? Both traditions recognize that unexamined certainty is the enemy of growth. Modern neuroscience confirms what these ancient systems intuited. Brain scans show that when we encounter opposing views, our amygdala often reacts as if under physical threat. But the Jains developed antidotes centuries ago. Their Dravya Lakshana meditation trains practitioners to mentally rotate objects, seeing a clay pot first as a water container, then as earth minerals, then as temporary form. This mental flexibility literally rewires the brain to tolerate cognitive dissonance. Try this hybrid exercise today. When someone contradicts you, pause and mentally reframe their position as one blind man's experience of the elephant. Then ask Marcus Aurelius' question from Meditations, "What might they see that I'm missing?" The brilliance of Encantabhada lies in its balance. It doesn't demand we abandon convictions, but that we hold them lightly. A Jain merchant negotiating prices wouldn't say, "All views are equal," but rather, "My perspective is one facet of a larger truth." This mirrors Seneca's letters on persuasion. We are more easily led than driven. When a dispute arises, whether about politics or parenting, the Jain approach isn't to fight or flee, but to adopt what psychologists now call perspective pluralism. Visualize the conflict from your opponent's vantage point, then from a neutral observer's, then from a future historian's. Each angle reveals new dimensions, like turning a gemstone under light. So here's your challenge tonight. Recall one firmly held belief, maybe about work, relationships, or even this video's themes. Write it down, then craft 3 alternative interpretations a Jain monk might propose. Not to discard your view, but to expand it. When was the last time you genuinely changed your mind? Not just adjusted a position, but experienced that seismic shift where old certainties crumble and new landscapes emerge. The Jains would say that moment, that uncomfortable, exhilarating moment, is where wisdom begins. Because as both Stoic and Jain traditions prove, the mind that can hold contradictions without shattering doesn't just survive life's complexities, it thrives within them. From the Spartan Agoge to the Jain practice of Encantabhada, from Viking Hugr to Inca Aini, one unbroken thread connects these forgotten wisdom traditions, the understanding that true freedom begins with disciplined awareness. These cultures, separated by oceans and centuries, all arrived at the same profound realization. The mind is both our greatest battlefield and most powerful ally. The Stoics didn't invent this insight, they refined what ancient civilizations had already carved into temple walls and woven into daily rituals. Resilience isn't about avoiding storms, but learning to sail through them. Presence isn't passive, it's the active cultivation of attention in a distracted world. Self-mastery isn't control over circumstances, but sovereignty over our responses. Consider how these principles manifest today. That moment you pause before reacting to a provoking email, that's the Spartan's cold river training meeting the Stoics' discipline of ascent. When you turn off notifications to focus on a loved one's story, you're practicing the Aboriginal dadiri as much as Marcus Aurelius' single-minded attention. The executive who meditates before a high-stakes meeting channels both the Buddhist monk's vipassana and Epictetus' counsel to first say what you would be. These aren't historical curiosities, they're living tools, as relevant now as when Zoroastrian priests tended their sacred flames. Marcus Aurelius left us perhaps the purest distillation of this universal wisdom. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Notice he doesn't promise calm seas, only an unshakable vessel. This week, choose one ancient practice to resurrect in your modern life. Maybe the Polynesian wind horse visualization when stress arises, or the Sumerian scribe's precision in your next task. Start small, 5 minutes of the samurai's twilight reflection, or the Inca's reciprocal kindness to a stranger. As these traditions show, transformation doesn't require dramatic gestures, just consistent, intentional stitches in the fabric of daily living. The Babylonian myth reminds us, chaos is the raw material from which order emerges. Your disciplined attention is the Marduk spear dividing the waters. Now it's your turn. Which of these timeless practices will you weave into your life? Share in the comments which culture's wisdom resonated most deeply. And if you're ready for more journeys into forgotten knowledge that shapes modern resilience, join our community of seekers, because the greatest discovery isn't buried in ancient texts, but waiting to be uncovered in your next mindful choice.